Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on Granby. My name is Mike Malloy, and I'll be your host this evening. Today's date is April 2nd, 2011. Our guest tonight is Roger Hayes, a 79-year-old native of Granby, and it's a pleasure having you here tonight, Roger.
Oh, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
Okay. Thanks for coming on such short notice. Okay, Roger, you've lived basically on Route 189 North Granby Road.
Yeah, the house that we lived in is at 348 North Granby Road. At the time, it was built for my parents when they were married.
Okay.
Next door to their folks and the farm at the time there.
All right.
Actually.
Okay. Now you said you were born in Westfield, at the hospital in Westfield.
Yeah, I was born in Westfield. My grandmother had ties to Westfield. My grandmother had come from Westfield, and so her family had been there, and so our ties were to that direction, I guess, probably from North Granby.
Okay.
Really.
Now your parents, what were their names?
My father was Gerald, and mother was Mabel.
Okay.
My father was a farmer, dairy farmer in North Granby, and they also had the funeral home, which had been in the farm for several generations, in the family for several generations, actually.
And the name of the funeral home?
Really, well, it was Hayes Funeral Home at first, and then later on it was the Hayes Hewley Funeral Home over on College Highway, which is now Hayes Hill and Carmen, actually, and Bill Carmen runs it now, actually, really.
Okay, so that was something that was in your family going way back.
Yes, it goes back, well, 6 generations to the mid 1800s, actually.
Wow. Okay.
Really.
So your family you had a family farm, and that's what they did as their vocation. That was their.
That was the main vocation. There was the farm, yes.
And it was a dairy farm, yeah. So you were busy.
Well, yes, basically dairy farm. When I been involved with it, of course, originally it was more or less the same generalized farm that all the farms
right.
start out as, a little bit of everything.
Much more self-sufficient farms back then.
One thing that my father never liked tobacco, and although we had tobacco barns on the farm, he himself had never raised tobacco, so that's one thing I never got involved with as far as farming.
For business reasons or ethical reasons?
I think just because he just didn't like the work in it. I don't think it was an ethical thing, particularly, really, but I think it was just maybe it was a dirtier job. Of course, with the funeral home and so forth, they had a different side business, so they may not have needed it because tobacco was, of course, the money crop for a lot of farms back then.
Right. Yeah, it was very common. Yeah. So he had his own. It just wasn't his cup of tea.
Yeah.
So you grew up on that farm with two siblings?
Yes, a brother, younger brother James, and then who was a little over 3 years younger than I am, and then my sister Fern, who was 12 years younger than I am, actually.
So you grew up there, and what are your earliest memories of growing up on the farm?
Well, I guess I always liked the farm, and always, I guess, liked to be out to the barn and around the animals and so forth. One of my earliest memories, I think, was after the 1938 hurricane. There was a field just below our house with the brook behind it, and after the hurricane, there were about I think there were probably 8 or 10 great big trees that were all laid over into that field, and I can remember as a youngster, I probably was about 6 or towards 7 at that time, and having those great big trees that were they must have been trees that were probably 3 or 4 feet through in the trunk there, and all laid over in the field down there.
Yeah.
But
That's a pretty vivid memory for a young
yeah,
kid.
Really, yeah. That's something that I really always remembered.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, it was a windy hurricane. So your earliest memories of the farm were probably revolving also around the actual activities that went on. Huh? So it was an active working farm, so that was your livelihood.
yeah. At that time, I would say probably, I'm not sure, probably 30 milk cows maybe at the time.
Okay.
Really, and I can remember some horses, but the horses had run away from my grandfather. When he was mowing or something.
Okay.
And so one of my first memories, I guess, he bought a tractor in the late 30s.
Okay.
And so I can remember that John Deere tractor. And,
so we had to replace the lost horses?
Really. Well, run away, I say run away with him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Got really. And so actually... say basically, I used to be out feeding the cows and that sort of thing, and probably started milking when one memory that I have back there actually was I was probably about 12 years old and doing the milking when my folks were interviewing a farm worker that they were going to hire and so forth.
Okay.
And I ended up. From then on, I did an awful lot of the milking, probably. So I started working pretty early.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
That's kind of the norm back then.
Yeah.
The kids didn't really.
Yes, yeah. It probably is. Although I will say this, I never was an early riser, and I never was one that I had to get up before school and do chores and so forth. It was always afternoon,
right.
afternoon work.
Now, you said your dad did if your family had the funeral home, and you mentioned that he had done some other things too.
Well, it was right. It must have been the early '40s when Eastern States Farmers Exchange was a farm co-op, and they had a representative here in Granby that got through, and they came and asked my father to be a representative for the co-op. And so from probably the early '40s until, well, I think it must have been probably 10 to 12 years or possibly. They handled about a car of feed a week that came into Granby Station, and they had to go down and unload it, and farmers came down there to pick it up, or it was delivered to them at their farms. And in the early parts of that, I was aware of it, and that towards the end of it, I probably was hoping a lot more in it doing that business too. So
he did that. You said that you did that 1 day a week.
Well, yeah. Well,
so the train would come in and drop off.
They had one railroad car that came in every week, and so that had to be unloaded every week. It was over a period of a day or two, and it usually came in the same day every week, and the farmers would come down to Granby Station and pick it up, and their feed and so forth, all bagged feed, basically, of course.
So this was just feed for the local dairy or the local farms?
It was for local farms. We had, once a month, we had a truck route that went up into East Heartland delivering grain.
Okay.
Up there too. Right. Really, and say they delivered it with a farm truck and so forth, and
interesting.
Basically.
Yeah. So was there anything else that he did? He seemed like he was a fairly active guy, was he?
Well, actually, he was active in town. He was chairman of the Board of Assessors for quite a while, actually, which eventually led to him getting the assessor job in the town of Woodbridge down there in New Haven. Really, he had studied it, and he enjoyed that. I don't think my father really liked the dairy farm as much, and so after I got out of college and so forth, he was busy with the funeral business part-time, and the well, by that time they'd got through with the grain business. He was still doing some of the. This was probably the time that he was on the board of assessors. I would guess it must have been probably in the 50s.
Okay.
Actually.
Now,
really.
No, you went to school in Granby. What are your memories of that? I mean, you went to. This is going back into the 30s. You were quite a while ago. For
yeah,
the school
I went to school in the two-room school, which is now the Legion Hall. Okay. Actually, and it was just about a mile from our house to there.
Right on 189.
Right on 189, and I was probably on the borderline where I used to be able to take the bus. So I can't claim I walked to school like so many of them can either. But
a mile's a pretty good hike for a little kid.
Really, but actually, so, and of course that was a two-room school there, and one of Granby's two-room schools, where the rest of them were all one-room schools at that time.
It's a fairly big geographic town, so they must have had quite a few scattered around town.
Yeah, there was at that time there was that school. There was the center school. There was the Cooley School was on East Street, and there were two schools in West Granby. I'm trying to think. I vaguely remember the building of the Floydville School, but I'm not sure when that did disband as far as the town goes. Of course, earlier than that, there were actually more school districts around town. Okay. Because there was a schoolhouse up in North Granby on Granville Road, and I think there was one up on the mountain too, where they were, but when transportation got better, so that they could get around a little more instead of having the schools that they walk to all the time. Then they consolidate them to some extent into the bigger one-room schools, probably you might say.
Yeah, you can only walk so far. Really, so they had to have them. Now you grew up on the farm, and you went to school, elementary school. Now, where did you go to middle school or high school?
Well, our school, the two rooms were the one room was first 1 through 4. Okay. And the second room was 5 through 12.
Really?
Basically.
5 through 12 or
5 through 8. 5 through 8.
Oh, okay. So you were in one school.
We were
for 8 years.
One school for 8 for eight classes there. Wow. Yeah, really. And then we went to Simsbury High School. Okay. For high school. Yep. Basically.
So what are your memories of Simsbury High School? That was they drew from a couple different towns then, didn't they?
Well, they drew at that time. They drew from East Granby, and Simsbury. Okay. Now my mother had also gone to Simsbury High School, and at that time I think they also had Avon, and I'm not sure, but possibly Canton too. Some at that time, but we were just the three towns at the time when I went, basically.
Right. So as you went through, are there any memories of school? The school that jump out at you, or?
Oh, not a lot in particular. I was probably one of the youngest members in my class, I think, because my birthday being in December. That's right. That puts you to start younger, and actually when I was in I liked school, I think, and when I was in probably about second grade, with the one-room school in Granby, I was paid attention to what all the first 4 classes were doing. Right. And so I actually skipped the 3rd grade in grammar school. Yeah. Really. And so that put me even a little younger in my class. So
so you were eager to learn.
Well, I paid attention in class and so forth, and grasped it anyway.
So after high school, what was the...
After high school, I went to the University of Connecticut and graduated with a BS from the College of Agriculture.
Okay.
At UConn.
Practical degree for
really
farm family.
Yeah, well, they had both at that time. They had both the 2-year school and they had a 4-year degree.
Okay.
And I'd gone into the 4-year degree, and I don't know, with no particular ideas of going on any farther, but then just ended up coming back to the farm and
putting it to use.
Yeah, putting it to use there, I think, probably.
Now,
Really.
you were when you came back, you became an active farmer, which was in that era that people were starting to not do that as much. There were a lot of other jobs in Pratt and Whitney and places like that people were going off to, because this is after the war, right? I mean, you.
Yeah. This was I graduated in 1952 from UConn, and came back and went into partnership with my father. And I'm not sure what I said. I'm not sure that he particularly cared about the farming as much. I don't know if he ever said that, but sometimes I had that feeling. And he had had other businesses he did, and so he was pretty liberal about. Generally about letting me do my thing, I think, up to a point, certainly.
Right.
Anyway, we did, well, after the barn, actually, at that time, was where the North Granby Firehouse sits right now.
Okay.
And the lay of the land there was it was fairly steep going out the back door of the barn and down across the brook to get across the pasture and land and so forth. And so after the 55 floods, my dad had just purchased a piece of land on East Street, which kind of went down was kind of a wedge right down in the middle of what our active farm had been when I was a boy.
Okay.
And so this was all flat land, and so after the 55 flood, we relocated the farm over there by putting in the first thing we did was put in a trench silo over there, which was a new way of keeping corn silage out of the upright silos, not into the upright silos, but in a cement-lined trench type of thing. And this
was that elevated, or was it under?
No, it was actually this was dug as a demonstration project, partly with the help of Seal Test, who in Hartford, who we sold our milk to at the time.
Oh, okay.
And they came out and they actually dug a trench down into the ground and sloped up the dirt on the sides, and then it was plastered with cement, but there was quite a little ledge over there where they did, and so they had trouble getting the sides as steep as they wanted.
Okay.
They wanted to have something like a 60 to 75 degree pitch on the sides, so that when silage is dumped in and then packed with the tractor and so forth, it kind of wedges.
Right.
But because of the stones and so forth, when they were digging it, they ended up closer to 45 degrees, and so it never did really work out as that wedge that you need when you're packing it with tractor wheels, because it was too flat.
So it would want to mush out more than it should have.
Yes, it tended to act as if it was on a level. It's still packed, but not with that wedge bit that you get from a steeper.
You couldn't pack quite as much
side. Yeah. So the first thing we did, they moved the silo over. They built the silo over there, and we used the silo over there for at least a year or two before we ever got a barn and everything else built over there. So we were hauling feed back from there to the farm on North Granby Road and so forth and all. And so then we built the barns, and eventually we built a farmhouse over there.
There's a lot of conversation today about the viability of dairy farming. Was the price fixed or was it supplemented like it is today?
Basically, the price was pretty much the same formulas then that it is today. It had been reworked. Some reworking of the way they figured the formula and so forth.
Now, to the layperson, I mean, we don't know anything. Does the government actually set a price for milk?
It's set. It's set. Well, I'm not sure exactly. They've reworked it some now, but it was set on the basis of what milk plants in Minnesota and Wisconsin were paying for milk, and then various factors. I've got beyond the point where I think I can explain it now.
I was just curious because I always heard people talk about
it's not actually the government that sets it, but it's done with government well, I don't know what the word is, supervision or but
I was wondering.
It has to be approved. Everything is approved.
But they do that because it's a commodity. It's a necessary commodity that you don't want to have. And it's always struck me as kind of odd that they chose that of all the food sources and stuff to kind of that. I know they do it with.
Well, I think it goes back to the early 30s. I think when the milk plants were setting the price,
right? And
it's like, I guess it's like any business if you have this, say, you can. I don't know. You can dictate what, and so the farmers weren't getting enough for their for their milk. They thought they would be taken advantage of. So they asked for some way that they could get a price set by formula.
Some guarantee.
Really.
Yeah. They do that with a lot of agriculture.
Back then. And so then it worked for a good many years and so forth, but there's no cost of producing factor thrown into it, and so forth and so forth. So and it's become outdated, and they're trying to find some other way to
supplement,
farmers band together in cooperative and so forth to try to band together, but.
Right. It's just an interesting little aside that most people never experience.
Really.
So I'll just roll into a couple rote questions that we use each time, and one of them I ask often is, what are the biggest differences in town in Granby is there anything that is especially remarkable to you in your 79 years in town? I suppose. There's few things have changed.
Well, it's grown from quite a rural town into a very suburban town now, and I guess that things were much simpler.
Okay.
Back then, when there weren't so many people around and so forth, but you realize that people move in, and the town's got to grow, and I think Granby's done a pretty good job of keeping adjusted and keeping the rural atmosphere. Granby, I think, has a reputation of being fairly friendly to farms and so forth.
When you live in a nice town, other people want to live there.
Well,
too.
that's right.
It's part of
the ones that is a little bit hard to like, I think, are the people that moved in halfway through, and then they don't want it to grow anymore.
Right.
I think probably some of the natives would have been happier if it hadn't grown as much to start with. But
so the more vocal newcomers. So you've been involved quite a bit. Before we get into that, why don't we just touch on you got married?
Yeah.
And your wife's name?
My wife's name is Frida.
Okay.
She actually lived up on Granville Road, and
okay. So she's a native too?
No. She's not a native. She came from Vermont, and in fact lived several towns in. Her folks came from Vermont for the jobs during the war, basically.
Very common theme.
Really, yeah, and what was I going to say here now?
So you met Frida. When did you get married?
We were married in 1956.
Okay.
I had met her. Well, I was probably out of college, and I'm probably about 4 years older than she is actually, and I actually met her because she belonged to the same church as I did.
Okay.
And actually, I got asked to drive and help chaperone the youth group one night by one of my next door neighbors who was the youth leader at the church at that time,
okay.
and probably I met her at that time more than
oh, okay.
Actually,
was she one of your charges to drive around?
Really? Well, I don't know. The thing I remember is going to a Pilgrim Fellowship dance from the First Church in Unionville.
Oh,
one night is the first time I really remember.
Okay, right. That's great.
And
so she must.
I don't know.
An impression.
I guess I must have. She must have caught my eye because after that I can remember going to some high school basketball games and so forth, and so really and that sort of thing.
Right.
And she also had started as a 4-H leader back before we were married, actually, and I was very active in 4-H. I was in 4-H growing up.
Okay.
In fact, when I was in 4-H as a youngster, we used to, ride all around the roads at night on our bicycles and so forth, back and forth to meetings and that type of thing. And no worry, you wouldn't do that today, and with the traffic and everything like that.
Different era, yeah.
Really.
So you had a lot in common with her.
But well, we seem to anyway. I don't know whether we had a lot initially, but.
So you had children?
I have 3 boys.
Okay.
Actually. One of them, the oldest one went into the computer business.
Okay.
The second one stayed home. He went to UConn too, in agriculture, and University of Connecticut. And he came back, and he came into partnership on the farm with me, and he's now running the farm.
Okay.
Now, along with his wife, and
what you mentioned the name of that farm, or the product that they sell.
Well, actually, what we always called it was House of Hayes, and which is on is on East Street, and the name's on the blue silo there on East Street.
Yep.
And but when my son got married to his wife Dorothy, she brought goats to the farm.
Okay.
And so now they have sweet pea cheese, and they've put up a building, and are pasteurizing milk and making goat cheese, feta cheese, selling cow's milk. And
it's interesting. Our last guest was commenting on all the small farms in Granby and surrounding areas that are micro producers of a lot of different things. Sounds like they're running one, basically.
Yes. Well, they are. They actually. Well, when I was running the farm, we probably had 150, 60 cows milking, and then this young stock to go with them. So we were running well over 300 head of animals, and they've now, with the dairy industry the way it is now, is not too good. They've cut back on their dairy cows in probably a half anyway, and they're milking as many goats, and have gone into this as a auxiliary way of making money.
Okay.
Really,
Now, what that you
and
said
so
they still
forth.
have the dairy cows. What are they producing with them? Milk, or is it?
Yeah, the milk.
Obviously, but is it for cheese or is it
no,
for
no? The milk
production?
is all sold wholesale, and right now most of it I think is going to Gaida dairies.
So you've been producing
basically.
milk in your family for in excess of 80 years. Because your parents were doing it, or is that a fair amount of...
Well, yes, we. In all my lifetime, our milk first went to a seal test in Hartford.
Okay.
Brian Chapman or R.G. Miller at the time when I was a youngster, and then when they're in there on the corner of with Homestead and Woodland, I believe the building is now, and they were there, an active dairy there, and they went out of business, and then milk ended up going to Maple Hill Dairy in Bloomfield, the Miller family.
Okay.
And then they shifted us over. Of course, it's always gone through a co-op.
Okay.
It's always gone through a cooperative.
So that's generally where
basically most of the milk it goes through the cooperative. There's particularly there were a lot of little dairies around that bottled their own milk. That we had some right here in Granby back when I was a boy.
Okay.
But there was a time when the government restrictions made it so that they just couldn't afford to keep up all the regulations and so forth to it, and so most of the small dairies went out, basically, and so then it went through the co-op, and the co-op decides where to go. So
it's just a simpler, more efficient way for them to sell their product.
Yeah.
Really took some of the stress out of it in some ways. Okay, so you had we talked about the growth of the town. Now, through that process, you indicated that in some way you've been fairly involved in town. I mean, what are some of you mentioned the Historical Society, but was there anything else you've done since in your?
I think probably one of the first things I was in was I was a director of the Cossett Library.
Okay.
Back years ago, I was involved in probably the merger of when the Cossett Library, which was the town library, merged with the Granby Library Association, which was the down in Granby Center, and formed what's now the Granby Town Library.
Okay.
I was in on that initially. I was on I believe the first Inland Wetlands Board for several years, until they asked me to go on to the Board of Finance, and I was on the Board of Finance for 11 years, I think.
Okay.
Up until just after the time when they started with their computer program to plan the 5-year projections and that sort of thing. They had just started that when I.
What year is
real? Oh boy.
Well, if you just give us the year that you stopped, that we could back.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's been a while now.
Yeah.
It's been a while ago. I don't know how long has Mike Warco been on the board? Because
I don't know if that,
he had just started on the board.
It's been a few years.
For a few years then when when I stopped being on the board.
Okay. So you were part of the process that we're talking about of it growing. So you were fairly in tune with a lot of the way the decisions were made. So I think that in and of itself makes people a little more comfortable usually with the decisions that were made. Was that a fair?
Well, I've always thought that well, you couldn't for one thing you couldn't complain if you didn't participate.
Yeah,
probably or
like
or shouldn't.
Yeah, right. It doesn't stop people.
Anyway, so I've tried to to somewhat keep an awareness of what was going on and participate to some point anyway. really. Of course, we always were involved with 4-H and 4-H activities and ag, county and state ag activities and so forth, and like that too, to some extent, really.
On the state level, they do a pretty good job of reaching out to the smaller farmers, don't they? They offer support.
Well, they always used to have a real good extension service, but back when I started, we used to have Connecticut was divided up into 3 districts, and they had 3 dairy extension agents, actually. Now they're back down to 2, and now, and it's getting to the point they don't have a lot of money even for them, and a lot of their work now becomes administrative work for other programs and so forth, and so there's nowhere near as much money available and help as there was, but they used to have quite a few extension programs and so forth, and of course continuing education, we always tried to keep current with new processes and so forth, really.
Yeah. I know they've put a lot of money into protecting farmland.
Really,
I mean, large sums.
Yes. That's has been a point of trying to buy development rights for farmland. Yeah. I never got too involved with that, and I have mixed emotions on that, because
do you?
No, it's a good thing to protect the farmland,
right,
and so forth, but. I've always worried. Well, there was a while that I thought there was a lot of farms in Connecticut where they moved to New York State and so forth because there's wider open spaces and so forth, and that sort of thing.
Cheaper land.
And cheaper land. Yeah. You could sell your farm. You could sell your farm here for houses and so forth, and go out there and get a big spread right around a farmstead.
Yep.
Where now, we've been running all over town. I mean, we've farmed corn down on the McGlen Game Preserve and down off Route 20 and so forth, and we're running 5, 6, 7 miles which begins to get expensive, you know.
Yeah, just the commute
to haul trucks, run trucks and tractors and so forth. Really, and it would be nice to have something all right close together.
The big farm.
But and so my thoughts early had always been, well, maybe someday, I didn't think I ever would, but maybe if my children stayed in farming, that maybe they would want to do something on a bigger scale somewhere where it was a little more economical. But at this point, I think we're beyond that point, because children, once you get ties to a location and you don't want to go.
Usually, especially if you have kids.
Anyway, I think we started on my youngsters, and I didn't mention my 3rd son, who actually went to, he started in diesel engineering at SUNY Cobleskill.
Okay.
And went through that, but then he got involved in computer business, and so he's got involved in computers now also, and
pretty diverse kids you got.
So he came back on the farm for a couple of years after college, but then went off into the computer industry.
Pretty good way to raise your kids, really, with that kind of background.
Oh, I think a farm is a good place to grow up, have kids grow up, have family grow up. I mean, they're busy. They don't get busy enough so they don't get into trouble. And on the other hand, they got to get a lot of good training and take the responsibility of taking care of animals and all that sort of thing.
Right.
Well, the whole 4-H program tends to be that way of responsibility and so forth. And
yeah, my mother and her brother grew up on a farm, and it was always they you know, to this day she talks about her memories of that. It always was a little bittersweet leaving the farm and going into the town. So I can imagine your kids retained a lot of that. I guess. Why don't we mention your kids' names, just because I don't think we actually said their names.
Terry is my oldest boy.
Yep.
Middle boy is Stanley.
Okay.
And youngest is Stephen.
Okay.
And Terry is actually in California now, although they have just bought and redone my old homestead, really, and are using it, going to use it as a home to come back to here when they come to Connecticut. So it's the original, kind of a second home.
That's fascinating.
For them now.
So it was a good experience. They're all kind of
really
staying around.
So, the other two are Stanley is on the farm on East Street now, and Stephen is on a partial. He is actually now owns a partial what was part of the farm, and he's also raising. They also, besides his work in computers, he and his wife also raise goats and make goat soap and sell meat goats and so forth too.
That's fascinating.
Actually,
yeah.
Really.
I think a lot of it sounds like your one son and your daughter-in-law are working that farm full time with the goats and the cows.
Yeah,
that's their main. That's their job.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do more what your other son is doing, where they have a job, and then they have small kind of specialty farms.
Well, there's got to be a lot of small farms around here. Well, the idea now is to get back to local food. Food, you know where it comes from, how it's grown, and so forth. And hopefully, it's more wholesome and so forth, and not necessarily organic. I have a little problem with. I don't have any problem with people growing organic food, but I don't think it has to be organic to be good and local.
Yeah, not that my opinion's important, but I tend to feel the same way. I think they overdo it a little bit.
They tend to some extent. Yeah.
But I mean, it's all intended for a better quality food, so it's all a good thing.
Well, local also, of course, transportation costs and so forth of hauling stuff back distances can save quite a little bit of money. But people have got to realize it's got to cost a little more locally in some ways because it costs more to grow it locally than it does.
People today are willing to spend a little more for good quality food. I think that's a general. When you're in Europe, everything seems to be local. They've really protected their local farms and stuff, and it almost seems like that's becoming more the norm in this country now, where you're getting a lot more local produce and local cheeses and there's stores that actually sell that. And we had kind of gotten away from that for 30 or 40 years with the big mass-produced products,
Well, everything was going to the scale of economy, basically, and so forth, and some industries are big business grown, but a lot of what they talk about big business is really farms, big farm families that have grown together and are still, we can like to consider family farms, even though they're sizable.
And there are a lot of times they're channeling it through a bigger cooperative.
Well, they go through a cooperative lots of times and so forth too. Yes, right.
So just a couple quick questions, and we'll bounce off them. And we had discussed quickly what you said. The biggest change was the growth and stuff. What was the best change in town, if there's anything that?
Well, I think. I don't know the best change.
Yeah.
The best change, I think Granby has done a real good job of their planning in town, both fiscally and they have kept it an agricultural town. They've been generally fairly friendly, I think, to agriculture. One little side, I guess, I served, I think, on 2 advisory committees to when they did reassessments, and I can remember one of the first ones that I served on. It must have been probably when Public Act 490 was fairly young anyway.
Okay.
But at that time, I worked through to, at that time, farmland was assessed on the basis of farmland, not for its best value as houses and that sort of thing.
Right,
and that's
right,
part
right.
of the 490 bit. Right. And I think that for just open space land that wasn't farmed and so forth, and I'm not sure about forest land. They all have a little bit different rules that they go under, but open space land particularly, I had pushed for that to be assessed as farmland also, so that people that open space land didn't get higher assessments and then feel that they had to sell their land for development because the assessments were higher.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah.
And I always thought sometime that it backfired a little bit on me, because when we got out starting to begin to rent land and so forth more as the farm grew and we needed to go farther and farther to get land to grow crops on, there wasn't the incentive for land to be assessed as farmland. It could be assessed as open space land, and still have the same assessment.
So they didn't need to rent it.
And so they didn't. There wasn't the incentive to rent it to farmers that way.
Well, you can't see everything down the road.
Really,
you make a decision.
I kind of laughed at myself a little bit that way. Well, I still think it was a good thing for the town to have it that way. But there were one or two little things like that.
Little quirks.
When it made it a little harder to convince people to let you use their land for raising farm crops on.
Right, they were already getting the tax abatement.
They were getting the tax break without it, and so they didn't need it. Really.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's one of those planning tools that makes it even easier to keep the open space that towns can use. So that incorporation of that sort of stuff, you think was one of the better things in town, or that enabled the town to retain some of its character.
Well, I think, fiscally they've done a wonderful job, I think, of keeping an even keel on town finances and so forth. Planning and zoning, and generally I think they've done a pretty good job with that.
That's a tough one, because you're always balancing individual rights.
The tough one about planning and zoning, and I've worried that a little bit about the town, because I say we have not done development rights, and if you ever want to or have to sell your land for whatever, retirement or whatever, what planning and zoning does with the kind of sets the value of what any section of town has for land.
That's right. Absolutely.
So you have a little mixed emotions that, and I worry some a little bit. I have worried some a little bit about being the last farm left in town, and nobody is worried about protecting that anymore, because they've protected enough, type of thing.
Yeah, that's a good.
Really, but
I think anytime you have a working farm, though, it's seen as a valuable entity.
Well, it is as long as it's a working farm. Right. It's fine. But with the tax schedule the way it is now, if it's not a working farm, the taxes are going to be practically the same amount as they are if it is a working farm.
Okay, so there's no benefit
without the incomes.
Right.
Because that's because you've had preferential tax assessment from what it may be its best cash value for the farm. Maybe, but still.
The nice thing about that is there's no restrictions to the generations, where if you sell your development rights, it's done. You're never going to develop it. So.
Yeah, we never did. We never got to that point. That I actually have seen some farms where they've sold the development rights and put the money back into the farm, and then several years down the road, the money's all gone and they're back in the same position that they were to start with. And
it's kind of like winning the lottery.
That's right. Yeah. Of course, that's I guess as much money management as it is anything else.
It is,
too. But that's kind of a sad situation just when that happens, really. And so I like to stay away from that type of position.
But This is kind of a segue off the earlier question, and you had phrased it a certain way, but feel free to expand any way you want. But what's your current opinion of the town? It sounds like we've covered most of that, but is there anything else you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think Granby's a great town to live in. I mean, I think the people are, in general, are a great bunch of people. Granby's a very volunteer-oriented town, really. You mentioned that we had talked earlier about the historical society, and I'm with the drummer after I stopped actively farming. After my son got back, we went into partnership. He brought him into partnership on the farm, and then when I turned 65. And was ready to start collecting, Social Security and so forth. I was told, and I'm not sure right or wrong, but that I couldn't have an ownership in the farm and
too much of an asset
and do that. And so I basically turned the farm over to my son at that time, and helped him out for quite a few years.
Yeah.
After that, and really, more or less working for him at the time, and so really
keeps you young.
And so once at that time I had probably a little more free time and so forth, and so then I started to do a little more volunteerism, perhaps, like driving for TAPS, really, and got into the drummer and the historical society.
I think once you get that civic,
really, but
once you get that civic involvement, and you get it's almost really, like an addiction, because it's so rewarding. It's just part of a well-rounded life.
Well, that, and of course you need something to do too.
That's
actually keeps you busy.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I had asked you one of the questions that I ask, and you can respond to this any way you like. Advice for young people growing up today. Is there anything that although what you just said is probably it, keep busy. That's good.
Well, I think keep busy. Tend to your schoolwork. Listen to what some of those elders or what your parents say.
Right.
So, it's interesting. Because my wife was a 4-H leader for over 50 years, really, and I have 7 grandchildren actually now. I don't know if we actually touched on that. Really, but some of these kids that come back from 4-H, well, she was into the second generation of kids and so forth, and. As they get old, as you get older, you do appreciate the advice that you didn't follow when you were younger, and I guess we all go through the same stage.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know, but I don't know how you can impress it on kids. They really have got to learn for themselves. But
so basically, take a minute and try to listen a little bit to the advice. That's great advice. Yeah. All right, Roger, it's been a pleasure having you on here tonight. We're just starting to interview guests from Granby, and hopefully we'll have quite a few more coming in. And we appreciate you joining us here tonight. It's April 2nd, 2011, with our guest Roger Hayes, a longtime resident of Granby, and sharing his memories of his years here and some of his experiences. We appreciate you joining us here tonight. Once again, you can view this on Channel 16, which is GCTV, at various times during the week, and it's also available online at gctv16.org, where you can pull it up and view it anytime you like. And we hope you're enjoying this as much as we are, and have a good night. Thank you.
Yeah.